born. I was born in Goa, which was a Portuguese colony at that point. So, under the British rule, Goa was one of those states that was occupied by the Portuguese government. So my father was a freedom fighter during that time, and that's where all this experience comes from, because I've been, ever since I was born, I've seen my father's activism to make sure that he is available for the people 24/7. And that's what I proclaim myself to. Those are the examples that I take from my father or my mother. Both of them were community activists. So we lived under oppression all our lives. So ever since
Wow.
I was, yes. So it wasn't easy, because we were limited to go out of the house, everything. So it was hard for us to make ends meet at that point. So we lived in real hardship at that time, where the government was against us, and we tried to balance everything. My parents were very much involved with our daily lives, even though we lived under oppression. But they made sure that we were all educated. So that was the biggest thing that was a blessing for us.
And I know
So
politics can be very, very interesting in India. OMG, as they would say it. I mean, and I could understand, well, as your father being a freedom fighter, what kind of restrictions you guys would have had to go through growing up with your father being in the political arena and being a freedom fighter. You had to really dot your I's and cross your T's.
no, he was in jail. I mean, he was in jail multiple times, because he was involved in strikes. He was a union leader, multiple things. I mean, it was hard for us, because every time he went to jail, I mean, we never knew whether he was going to come back. But the problem is, you know, he was still a fighter. I mean, I don't think in our daily lives we see any of those activism. So when I look at all the activism, I mean, I say this is nothing. I've seen the worst.
So what year are
So
we talking about? What year are we talking about?
these are in the early 70s, um, during that time. So late 60s, 70s, during that. That's when we got that part of India liberated.
Wow,
So
it's interesting. I was in India around that time, 1975. That's when I was studying in India. And I've always
yes,
heard about Bombay to Goa, but I've only been to Bombay. I've never been to Goa. But now that you came from Goa, I'll have to find a reason to visit Goa.
no, because of the fear of our family being targeted, because we were expats. Technically, my parents are from South India, which is Kerala. So, I mean, I know the language, I know the culture, but my parents settled in Goa. So that happens to be just like us immigrants here, but what we realize. So Goa was a foreign country, I mean, if I may say so, at that point, before it got liberated from the Portuguese culture, I mean, government. So, I know what it means. So I've lived that through the 70s before I migrated to the United States. So I know and then the education system, because at that point, Portuguese was my first language till the fourth grade in Goa. So, and the higher education was from Pune University, which was in Mumbai. So I had to move to Mumbai, or at that point it was Bombay, to get myself educated. And we were fortunate enough that my dad actually moved us from there. Plus, also we had a fear of um, our family being targeted by extremists at that point. So so we had to leave under a condition that my mother said, and as long as my older brother stays with my father, my mother, my sister, and we moved away from that place for fear of us not being harmed. So that's a little story from us. So during the
Wow.
freedom movement, there are a lot of locals that was against us.
That is interesting. That is interesting. So tell us a little bit now. So, what motivated you to come to the United States of America?
Well, um, when I mean during my teenager lifestyle, I mean, it was we were in a stage where we had hard times in our lives because uh, we had it was hard to meet you know with our requirements for daily living. So my father died when I was like in my late teens. uh, he was 54 years old, and my brother and my sister wanted to have their education, so I had to drop out of college. So at that point, my father passed away, so somebody had to take over and take care of my mother. So so my brother had to. So both of them went to medical school. So for that to happen, in India, it was, it's who you know there. So
Mm-hmm.
with my
Mm-hmm.
father's
Mm-hmm.
background, so they had to get into private medical school. Private medical school entails where you have to pay some capitation to get into the medical school, and then I had to make things happen. So I had to sacrifice. So I
Wow.
moved. Yes. So I dropped out of college, did what I have to, and then once they graduated, it was time for me to come. I mean, my mother said, "Hey, you don't have anything here in in India, because at that time there's no opportunities if you're not educated, or even if you're educated, there's limited opportunities. That's why America was the best option at that point for me to make ends meet,
Mm-hmm.
if we say that. So that's why I came to America with 50 bucks in my pocket. The ticket was the only thing that I had. And my father's principles and morals and my parents, what they taught me, said, "Hey, you know what? Go out." My mother said, "Go out there. You're a good man. You've done enough. I think there's nothing here India can offer you. So, you've got a huge potential. Go out there and see. Make best of what the family has taught you." So I came here in 1991, November. And from there, there's a lot more to it. So starting from selling newspapers to who I am today,
Wow. And
being
I did see in your bio that you are a certified radiologist, right?
Yes, I'm a certified radiology technologist, which is basically X-ray technician. So that was the only option at that point because I couldn't afford to go to a med school today. Which is offered today
But you are the
because
people who make most of the money nowadays because everybody need you. You know, when you nowadays when you look at what goes on in the hospitals, they all wait on the radiologist technician to tell them what's going on.
yes.
And
So I was fortunate to. I'm sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
I was fortunate enough to be in a healthcare industry. At that point, I did sign up to go to med school, which at that point, a radiologist actually told me, "Hey, you know what? By the time you graduate, it's going to cost you over $1 million by the time I get the specialty. So why don't you because you're good with your hands, you have a gift that none of us have." So I said, "Why not?" So, and I pursued that, and I worked my way up from there. My life started off as a janitor, working in a Burger King store, to applying to went to night school to keep up with my education because none of the paperwork was transferred from India to here. It was red tape. Well, at that point, there was no connection system what we have today.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm. And that is
so
so interesting because it's people like you and your background that really, teach the world what it is like to come from zero to a hero. That now you're a radiologist technician, you're connected with all these politicians, all these commissioners, state reps, leaders, and soon you may just be one of the Florida representative in the House of Representatives here. But you know what? It's interesting, really, really interesting, and I think that's why we like to talk to people like you on this show, so that you can motivate our viewers throughout the world, where you came from, your background, and how you struggled through to be successful and be a man of who you are now in the community and the society here in the United States of America.